All right, well, finally we made it to the Gateway Farm here with Abby and Trent. We had a little bit of a hiccup on the way down last night, but you've probably seen one of our other videos that Trent, master of emergency field repair, was able to get our trailer all patched up. But here we are, and so it's great to finally be here with you guys.
Yeah, you guys too.
Thank you guys for making the trip up.
Yeah. So far we've had a wonderful visit. They got quite a place here, and I think later on in this video or in subsequent videos we'd love to show you more. And certainly they've got their own channel. They put up lots of great content of all the fun stuff they do here. So be sure to check out their channel. Do you want to tell them where to go to see that kind of content?
Yep. We're mostly on Instagram and Facebook at the Gateway Farm. So those are two primaries.
So be sure to check that out. But being our first visit here, maybe tell us a little bit about what your operation here is all about. This place is great.
So we bought the land 6 years ago, or 7 years ago, 2012. I don't even know, 2014, there we go. And we've just been building up to a diversified farm where we're gonna have an on-site farm stand. We ship our maple pretty much worldwide. And so we've just been adding a little bit every year. 4 years ago was a sugar house. Right now we're in production of building a barn to house a multitude of livestock, and just try to be self-sufficient but spread it with the people that we know, and whatever we can ship we're going to try to ship.
So Trent already let the cat out of the bag, something that we hinted at on the drive up here. Having never been here, one of the things we were most excited about was seeing this maple syrup operation that Abby and Trent have going on up here. When is the best season to come check out the syrup operation?
Definitely March. That's when the sap is flowing and the wood is being put to the arch to boil at a very high temperature, and the smell of maples everywhere. So
Yes.
yeah, I would definitely say March.
Yeah.
All right, because you can see behind us, this is their awesome building that Trent built. So we'll get deeper into this later on, but we're hopefully going to come back and they're going to show us that operation. So you said you bought the place about 6 years ago. How big is the farm?
Yeah, we bought it in 2014.
Okay.
We initially bought it with 321 acres. The next year were approached by some neighbors that had adjoining land that they didn't really know anything about. Landlocked between us and another neighbor, so we bought 24 more acres, so we're now at 345.
Yep.
About 300 of that is woodlot, so we utilize it with a skidder and a sawmill where we mill all our product that we use for all our outbuildings. Our own firewood, sugar house firewood, my father's firewood. We don't sell firewood, not enough time in the day yet. So, but other than that, we use the 40 acres of fields that we have is 20 of it is cow pasture. That's beef cow pasture, and then there's our milk cow and her heifers, and then pigs are rotationally grazed. So we've got probably out of all that 16 acres of hay land, and then we rent in and buy in more hay to sustain throughout the winter.
Well, it sounds like you got a lot going on. We've talked about the maple syrup. Something else that Trent just mentioned is it timber framing? Is that what that kind of work is called?
Yep, timber framing is
there's a kind of old school
older
buildings.
style of beams and mortise and tenon instead of just 2x material being stick frame. So the sugar house is a timber frame material.
Okay.
That was all sawed off the land, pulled off the land for logs and milled right here. So it doesn't go very far. It stays right here.
I think you were saying that some of that expertise runs in your family?
Yeah, my father, my grandfather on both sides was carpenters. One of them was during the Great Depression. He was a carpenter in Burlington. So it's been handed down, but certainly the timber framing is kind of a niche to us, and we really like specializing in that. It's not your everyday construction that a lot of people can do. So it's neat to be able to showcase a sugar house that isn't your ordinary.
The maple sugaring is also a generational thing on
Yes.
the side of the family as well.
Yeah, that's been 8 generations of maple sugaring.
And then what about the name of the farm? How'd you come up with that?
You want to say that one?
It kind of has a bunch of different angles to it. When our farm was being fundraised for because the development easements were sold into a trust, they considered this valley when they were fundraising as the Gateway Project. And they came up with that name because this is a stretch of road that kind of is the gateway into the town of Bristol. And Bristol's town slogan name is the Gateway to the Green Mountains. You can see the Bristol, Vermont town sign has the gateway to the Green Mountains printed on the sign. So it felt like there was a gateway in a bunch of different ways that way. And then, as cheesy as it may sound, this was like a dream come true for Trent and I. And so it was kind of the gateway to our dreams. And our last name is Rollo, and it's often pronounced wrong, so we didn't really want to use the last name.
Rouleau.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Rouleau
7
farm.
different variations, so we
Yeah.
didn't want to have just, you know, the Rollo farm, and we wanted something that was a little bit easier to say.
Yeah,
Now, the name is great, and I think that's a great story too.
yeah, and it kind of just seemed like it fit.
I mean, people think Vermont, they think Green Mountains, and
Yeah.
this is as authentic as it gets. I mean, we're in this beautiful little valley. What's the name of the river that runs through here?
Baldwin Creek.
Okay. So that's beautiful. So they've got water, they got well water, everything. I mean, there's so much we could go into today, but Trent also mentioned that they don't sell firewood, but they sure split a hell of a lot of it. And tell us a little bit more about your firewood
So
side of things.
the maple sugaring, before we added some newer advancements into reverse osmosis and some advancements on our actual sugaring arch that helped with efficiency, we were doing about 50 cord of firewood just for sugaring.
Just one season's worth?
Just one season, yep.
Wow.
And then we've got it down to the point right now where we're about 15 cord. Last year was a short season, and we did 12 or 13. Year before that, we did 22 cords, so we're kind of in the average of 15 cord, and then our house is 5 cords of firewood. So there's never, you know, we're always splitting firewood somewhere for something.
Now the house, how much of your annual heating is the firewood?
It was 100% until last year. We actually invested in a heat pump that does mostly October and May weather. Once it gets below a certain temperature, we like to do wood stove, so it's just not costing us a lot of electricity. But
Well, we've got a big wood stove in the house to keep us warm when it's -20. So when it's kind of mild,
yeah,
and we
when it
have the
was
wood stove going, we have to open
40
windows,
at
so-
night, 35, 40 at night, but then it gets 60 during the day, you're starting a wood stove, and then you're opening all the windows. So
Yeah.
we said it was just that intermediate couple weeks, you know, spring and fall, that we wanted to take care of.
Now,
So-
where are you getting the wood? Because you've got all this land.
The wood is all off of our property.
All right. So you're logging your own land.
Yep, if we're logging our land, we'll save the tops of the trees for our personal firewood if it's saleable saw log, or if it's something we're gonna mill, or when we thin out our sugar woods, we're taking whole trees out, and, you know, whether it's saw logs or we're keeping it for firewood.
So, I mean, this sort of gets into how we got to know Abby and Trent, and how this question of, you know, splitting firewood came up. What have you been using so far to split, you know, anywhere from 20 to 50 cord a year?
We've got
I assume you're not swinging an axe.
No.
Got enough other stuff to
we
do.
We stopped that a long time ago. We've got a 3-point hitch handmade by my grandfather 40 years ago. And it's kind of slowing down, needs some work. We've also hired a guy with a firewood processor and had some issues with that. So we're trying to kind of just stay localized to ourselves here.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the tractor mount, which works for a lot of folks, and you've certainly got the tractors, but you know, it's got a productivity issue. You're doing a couple of cord a year for your cosmetic fires, or a little additional heat. That works great, but I think your workload kind of gets beyond what a tractor mount can do. So I think that gets into the RuggedMade splitter, because Trent and Abby reached out and had talked to us about our splitters, particularly our 700 series, which seems like it probably is a good fit for someone who needs more than your store-bought, smaller, slower machine. Probably needs some speed. Now, do you tend to operate by yourself or with help? What's a typical splitting session like for you?
All of the above. If we get an hour, Abby will go out there by herself and split. If I can line up somebody to help, if Abby's doing chores around the farm and doing stuff, I'll have somebody help, and we'll split for a couple hours where there's just one person splitting. We have a conveyor that we use a lot of times into our dump truck.
Nice.
That's with the 3-point hitch on our tractor, but this, hopefully, being self-sufficient, I can use the bucket of the tractor and transport with tractor instead of using our dump truck. So a lot of pros to that. And I mean, the idea is that we don't have to have a tractor tied up all the time. And you can go out there and start it and split for a half hour if you want, instead of trying to make a 5-hour production out of it.
Right.
Well, I think it's time to break out the splitter. I mean, we came all this way to come see the operation here and bring the splitter up here. Let's open up the trailer and roll it out.
Sounds like a plan. Watch out, Maddie.
All right, guys, so here it is. Here's our RuggedMade 72830. We talked before and we thought that this would be a good fit for you, talking about what kind of wood you're splitting, how much you're splitting, what kind of furnace you're putting into, but maybe tell folks a little bit about what your needs were for that kind of stuff.
Yes, certainly. The house is going to be shorter than the sugar house, and that's mostly hardwood.
Okay.
So definitely, I think our wood stove is 20-inch, 22-inch, so it's about in there.
Mm-hmm.
But the sugar house is as long as we can get it, but we don't really like handling 4-foot sticks of wood. So 30 inches is ample for that. And the firebox is actually 8 feet deep, so sometimes we'll stack 2 rows of wood lengths inside the firebox to get it more longer, even heat. But yeah, it's just a mix of hardwoods and softwoods for the sugar house, mostly longer but straighter grains. So speed is always a killer. We always want to go as fast as possible. Unfortunately, when you're splitting firewood.
Yeah, no, I think with the volume you're doing, and you're not even commercially selling it, it's just for your own use. So yeah, the 728, that's got, I think, plenty of power to split what you're splitting. We're not talking about taking down some giant old tree full of knots. You want to move. And as we later, I think we'll head over to the wood pile, do a little bit of splitting today.
Oh, absolutely.
And we can break out the stroke restrictor, which is, is an attempt to kind of give you the best of both worlds. Most people know about these, return detents, and you kind of want to be able to keep your hands free. But if you're only splitting 20-inch, 20-inch rounds, this is going to allow you to set that stroke restrictor, save that extra cycle time, and speed things up. So we can get into some of the details when we get over by the wood pile. And then, we'll talk about some other things like this has got the log lift. I mean, that really, I think, is going to be key.
Perfect
That's
for me.
a key.
Yeah, and it really, it doesn't matter how big you are or how many people you have, it pretty much takes 3 people to really keep up with this thing.
Yeah, and we borrowed one from a friend a couple years ago that had a log lift, and I was like, wow, I don't need a log lift, but just to stack 5 or 6 rounds there, and you just roll them in, and I mean, the efficiency was a lot faster. Even though we didn't really use it myself for the lift purpose, but it had a tray, a table you could just stack your next blocks there with.
Yeah, I mean, it's great having the tractor with a bucket or a bobcat to bring the logs over to the staging area, but still just having that be able to lift it up. And even if you just leave it up as a work table,
that was my
biggest
resplits part of it, was just having it as a work table.
Yeah, so we got the 4-way on there. We got some other things we can talk about, but anyway, so I think it's time to probably head over to your wood pile and
sounds like a plan.
Let's get it fired up and split some wood. So that's basically what we call storage or transportation mode.
Yep.
Have people like to throw a tarp over it. That seems to
stack it in there.
Yeah. But we're gonna raise that just enough to get this in there.
I see.
Other than that, it's good to go. So we got our our log lift and our out and back with our detent, and I got a 4-way, and
all right.
Let's choose the first log.
Any and all of these.
Oh, you have at it. How small do you usually go?
We burn anything. I like to call them overnighters.
Yeah.
They're big, they're overnighters.
So right now we got this unrestricted, we've got the 30-inch stroke going. We're going to split a few this long, and then we'll put the stroke restrictor in, get it down to, we'll probably put it in the 20-inch position, since a lot of this logs look like they're about 18, 20 inches. There we go. All right, go for it.
What's your average piece of hash that
Yeah.
you're using? That's pretty gnarly. Absolutely.
Does that need to get smaller?
Oh, that's perfect.
That's an all-nighter.
That's a sugar house truck right there.
Why don't we throw that stroke restrictor in? All right, well that batch went pretty well.
Yeah.
So these holes are where you get the choice of a 20-inch cut, a 24-inch cut, and then unrestricted is 30 inches on this machine.
Yep.
And then this is the storage spot for the stroke restrictor. I think that log must have been 31 maybe.
Yeah, that was cool.
All right, so this little guy is just gonna kind of psych out the valve's detent mechanism and save you some cycle time. Now you do one cord, I don't know if you noticed the difference, but you do 10, 15, 20 cord.
Oh no,
That's,
taking up that foot every time is a big difference.
Because you can crank down pretty tight on that because you don't really want it to rock. And then, yeah, let's go for it. These usually like a bit of choke to start.
Yep.
When you cut, do you use like any measuring tool, like those magnetic things? Just
by eyesight.
yeah. But what do you usually cut? Like if you think you're cutting for the sugar house?
If I'm cutting for the sugar house, I'll cut like 26, 28.
28.
Because if it's a 30-inch splitter, I always try to have, a couple inches.
Yeah, yeah.
And the house can take, I think 20 inch, but I generally cut 16.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the firebox, like when we go to bed at night, we put in 5 good pieces and try to stack them like Lego blocks so it'll go overnight.
Yeah. When you're like midwinter for the house, how often are you restoking the furnace?
We stoke it in the morning, and then probably afternoon we'll put a couple pieces in, and then at night we stoke it before we go to bed. So 2 good stokings and then maybe 2 partials, 2 little ones, just to keep the fire kind of going through the day.
Do you keep the fires going when you're in like peak maple syrup season?
Yeah. Peak maple syrup is pretty much still, I mean, it's not as much because the daytime's above freezing, so we don't have to have it cranking. It's a Yodel F500 or F600, and it does really well. It's a non-catalytic converter, so we like it.
Especially with oak, it keeps the coals going like, all day.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well I see you picked a couple more.
Yeah.
So they're not little. Yeah, it's fired up.
Cut, buddy. Good cut. Start stacking this, sweetie.
Yeah, I can't start grabbing wood.
Come on, guys.
Stack it.
You gotta start stacking the firewood.
Do you want?
What do you
Oh.
mean?
Do you want to be warm this winter?
I'm just kidding, buddy. No, that is
Yeah, I mean that was like, you know,
almost fun.
almost, yeah. I mean, what's nice about the log lift is just because you're strong enough to lift those suckers,
Oh yeah.
you don't want to do that 50, 100 times.
Roll them over there, pick it up. No, that's awesome.
Yeah. So the way we set it up, one of the newer features we added is you can get this
Get your back.
valve platform. That's all right. Is angled. So we had, that was based on a lot of feedback from customers.
Yeah.
Some people still line it up this way and run it this way, but what we found is that kind of 45-degree angle is nice. And we put the log lift on this side, but that can be moved over to the other side. I think a lot of folks, where they're always going to operate it by themselves, they kind of create a cockpit over here. You got your engine, your valve, and your log lift all on one side.
Oh, you can just flip-flop.
Yep, just flip-flop it. So it's kind of, well, and the other thing is, some people feel really strongly about
one person.
Yeah.
Just moving logs, one person splitting.
Yeah.
Definitely, because I mean that's.
And it's still kind of
as fast as it's going, one person can be busy just bringing logs over.
Yeah, you really need a minimum of 2 to keep up with it, but you can run it nicely from the other side too. And but it could be swapped back the other way, and some people have kind of a strong feeling about handedness. They want their left hand on the log and their right hand on levers, or vice versa. This lets them choose, but that's how we set it up for you. And the other thing we did is this tank. Notice there's tons of room, especially if you mentioned, you got multiple tractors here. If you're going to bring in a bucket, you got lots of room. But so we put this tank in the rearmost position. But if you notice, there are some additional bolt holes. That's also kind of if you were building this yourself, you would decide where you want that.
You could slide it forward or backwards.
So if you don't want all this standing room, maybe you're always operating on one side, you could move it farther forward, and then that nose weight, that tongue weight, would be a lot lighter.
Yeah.
So here you got the advantage of the room. The price you pay is it's heavy to move around.
That's awesome.
So if someone doesn't have a tractor, they might want it. And that's just 4 bolts. You could do that after the fact. There are a lot of machines where you're kind of stuck kind of doing one of these to be near where the action is.
Over the tire.
Yeah, so we,
Reaching.
yeah. So we figured prioritize ergonomics, even if it means making it a little heavy to move around.
Well, yeah.
Most splitters,
The more comfortable you are, the safer you are.
yeah, I mean, the majority of splitters, they kind of live in one spot where you do your splitting.
Yeah.
So we figured we'd focus on that.
Yeah, it's not something you're moving around 3 times a day. And
Yeah. And if you are, you might just set it up a little differently.
yeah.
No, this is awesome.
Yeah.
No, it's very sturdy. I like it. It's not flimsy out to the front at all.
Yep, the bipod leg tends to handle even when you got pretty big log out here.
Yeah.
Or stack up 3 or 4 at a time. That definitely works.
So no, like I was saying, when we're splitting, I've used a lot of splitters that when you come out to a full stroke, it'll really squawk and bog down the motor. So you always jump to let your hand off, or when you go back, it really makes it squawk. And this one doesn't do that at all.
Well, the 728, the 28 ton, I mean, that's focusing on speed, but still a lot of power. I mean, our 22 ton machine, the 300 series, that tends to split most of what people are splitting. Unless you're just taking down some monster stump with knots and stuff.
Yeah,
and
we don't like doing that.
yeah, and that's, there's really not much out there that's going to split that anyway. But so here you get a nice compromise between speed and power. It's still got the 22 gallon per minute pump.
Yep.
And 420 cc engine, so anything that you should be splitting, it'll pretty much go through. And really all I ever do time to time is something that's like you knock that one off, swap it around 180, and it went right through it.
Yeah.
If it just hits that naughty grain the wrong way.
The wrong way, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
No, we're certainly used to that.
Yeah.
What,
So.
sweetie? That one?
Oh, don't you worry.
Yeah, we're gonna do all of those, Sophia.
And we're not kidding when we say stacking.
So it sounds like the way you guys are going to end up using it is going to really take advantage of what we tried to put into in terms of one length for your house, one length for the sugar shack, because that's not every person who's got those 2 different kind of applications.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool that you
No, I really like that. Yeah, that just saves you a lot of time right there.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think all the ones we're used to, it's one size.
Yeah.
yeah. And if it is a longer one, like 30, even some of them are 36, you just, when you're splitting 20-inch rounds, you're burning a lot of time. Like you were saying, what, 16, 18 inches for your house mostly?
Yeah. Yep. 16, 18 inch for the house.
Yeah, so this 20-inch position seems like it'll work great for that.
No, that gives you a little bit of room to finagle the log in there.
Yeah, if you don't cut it perfectly.
Yeah. Everything I do is perfect.
Oh, yeah. Well, it seems like when it comes to the timber framing, I see some real craftsmanship there.
Well, thank you.
We're gonna look at that closer in another visit.
No, that is.
I mean, you know your way around these machines, but those are pretty much
I
the
like this
the
too.
features.
Our last one
Those,
that we used
yeah,
didn't
that
have
is
that.
wicked.
Well, I didn't even know you guys had a conveyor. So when you mentioned that,
For the tractor mount one.
Yeah, I
Yep.
just got an it's an old grain elevator. We put a rubber belt on,
Yeah.
and it runs off a generator, so it would be perfect because all this little loose stuff falls through, and then you just throw your chunks on there,
Right.
and you're handling it less.
can it be positioned right at the foot of the catcher tray?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah. So
and
that's
we made up it's metal, but then we made up a 2x6 lumber on the side, so it's a V groove, and then there's a catch basin, so it'll fall down in there, and it just tumbles until it grabs it enough to go.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of folks who,
No, that's
who hook
awesome
that
because
up.
if there's something you kind of want to resplit, you're not picking it off the ground every time to put it back up there.
That's what it's
It's right
all about.
there, yeah.
I mean, people want to split. They don't necessarily want to be picking logs up, and definitely not handling the same wood 3 or 4 times off the
You
ground.
want to handle it
once.
as minimal as possible.
Yeah, but the conveyor belt is really closing the gap between this and a processor. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a processor.
Yeah.
But if
I
you
don't know, it's pretty darn fast.
so you have that conveyor going up and dropping
Just
into
into the dump truck.
dump trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you use totes or anything like that?
We don't, we've thought about it, but we just usually, if we're transporting anything, we'll put it in the dump truck, whether it's my father's wood or if we're going to the woodshed and we want to just split for a while, we'll split and then we just dump it at the woodshed, and as we're pulling, it'll just slide down the truck as we're stacking.
Yeah.
No, but
Actually, yeah, you could probably have your bucket right
yeah,
at the
the
foot of
bucket
it.
will go right there, and we just stack it. I mean, it's a pretty good sized bucket.
It's red in
Yeah, it's red oak, bud. That's pretty cool. You want to keep it?
Go put in the
That's yours.
woodshed.
What do you have for a deer? I didn't see what model that was.
It's a 2555,
Okay.
older, 1984, pre-electronic, everything.
No def, no yeah.
Nothing.
You can actually maintain it in the field.
Yeah, I had an injector pump go on it and took it out, put 4 new injectors and injector pump in it right in the yard here, and runs awesome. So no, it's older equipment's definitely.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the excavator. You know,
Yeah.
there's some people who will go out of their way to get an older machine that's
Yeah.
pre-def, pre-fuel, pre-electronic controls.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can work on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like everything you guys are doing here is very geared around self-sufficiency.
Oh yeah, no, we try to fix anything we possibly can, because you hire somebody to come in and fix it, that's just cost you that much more.
Now, you know, some of the folks back at the office were
Thank you, buddy.
curious. You know, there's so much homesteading going on. We were
Yeah.
curious, where do you guys position yourselves in the world? You know, farming versus homesteading. Are these?
More so farming. I like to say homesteading, you know, it's neat, but
Well, we're doing everything that homesteaders are doing in the sense that, you know, we're growing our own meats or raising our own meats. We have the milk cow. We're doing the syrup. Like, we consume a lot of our own.
Mhm.
We try to be self-sufficient, but we take it just like that one step further. Farming,
Mhm.
we're selling our
Dad,
product as
cut
well.
this
Whereas I
thing.
think more
can't right now, kinda, hang
homesteaders
on.
are doing
No,
it
cut it.
primarily for themselves.
Yeah.
Does that make
Cut
sense?
it.
Yeah.
a big thing is the meats in general have to be USDA inspected. So
Okay.
when we bring animals to get processed for the farm stand, that has to be federally inspected, the whole process. Where homesteading, I feel like we could just do it here, you know, we have no problem if we were going to eat a pig by ourselves, we butcher it and do all our own work, but we can't to legally sell it.
Mhm.
So that, I think, is the biggest differentiation to me for homestead to farming.
Yeah.
Dad, when you're done
But I think it's cool when the
Okay,
difference
buddy.
gets a little blurred, because you know, I think for so many people it's a financial thing, it's a lifestyle thing, probably more than anything
Yeah.
else. And you know, you've got people who are making it work on, you know, a couple of acres,
Right.
and then you're on 300 plus.
Yeah.
And but I think it's just great to see.
There's a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the difference might just be scale and
Difference is probably who
selling
you talk to,
product and-
too, you
yeah.
know.
But I think the way you're doing it really highlights how farming has always been a business. I think a lot of
Yes.
people have lost the sense that it's always been a business, even
Yeah.
if you're more self-sufficiency oriented. But I think all the different businesses that you bring in, from the framing, the maple syrup,
That's a wood
it's
Yeah, well,
really taking it to another level.
it's kind of, you know, the same thing with anything. 100 years ago, everybody was self-sufficient. Their own meat, their own eggs, their own milk. And then we got into the central location where everybody stopped doing that and went to their, you know, jobs and just went to buy stuff. Now I think it's kind of coming back more, where there's going to be more smaller farms and not these bigger, large commodity
you'll
places.
always have that still. But
Yeah.
I think, like you said, it's going back in time a little bit with the homesteads.
Now, Abby, I think we talked. Trent told us a little bit about his family background and generations and farming, and I think there was some auto body and auto repair work in there. Because
Yeah.
my grandfather ran an auto body shop,
Oh, no.
and my great grandfather was a blacksmith. And on my mother's side, my mother grew up on dairy farms in Ohio, Mississippi, upstate New York.
That's awesome.
And
Upstate New York.
yeah.
That's where my parents are from.
Yeah, so but I think you also have, a background in this kind of stuff. So how did you, what made you want to stay with this lifestyle?
I just loved it as a kid, and I think that most kids kind of blossom and flourish in a farm setting where they get to be outdoors a lot.
Yeah, free-range kids.
Yeah.
Creativity.
And
It makes their
so,
mind,
as a
think
kid,
of ways to stay busy.
I think like what we were just talking about, more as time progresses, more people got away from the farming and the homesteading. And I had a lot of friends that were just mind blown by the farm that I grew up on, and so I realized that it was quite the blessing. And I enjoyed the lifestyle, and we both went to college for agriculture, so we just knew it was something that we wanted to continue. And you look at his hands, we like to work with our hands and be outside, and so the farm has been able to give us that opportunity. But I grew up on a dairy farm, and my dad grew up on a dairy farm, and his dad and his dad.
Yeah, one thing I love about this is I think about my family background from the dairy farming. I didn't grow up in that environment, but that farming element to the auto body and mechanical stuff, and then I like it when it all comes together. I like machines, and then you've got the what we're splitting or what you're farming, and I just get a kick out of it.
Yeah, it's fun.
So this has been
one way you're still tied into it,
Yeah. So anyway, we've really enjoyed coming up here to visit, and we're gonna leave this beast with you for a while, and we're looking forward to hearing how it works out for you, and seeing how you use the wood, and just keep powering through with you. I mean, you got so many projects going on, buildings and
I should stop
land.
taking on too many projects.
No, I love it. I love it, and I'm sure your audience is loving it, and I hopefully our audience is going to start to get a better taste of what you're doing up here, and I'm sure they'll visit your other channels too.
Hang on, Kenny.
Have to get their hands on some Gateway Farm syrup.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
or I'll send you home with some, for sure.
Then cut it down.
And then you guys will come back in March.
Yeah,
And you'll see how
roll up our sleeves, do some work.
Yeah.
Dad, cut it.
It's not a spectator sport, I assume.
It can be.
Dad,
You want to cut this one, bud?
Yeah.
Okay, let's cut it real quick.
All right.
One last cut, okay?
Gotta move your hands, bud.
You wait a second, buddy.
Oh, nice stack.
Ready?
Doggy.
Where you want to cut it? Right here? Right here? Right there? There, does that make you happy?
Well, now at least with that, we'll let the next generation stack that,
Yeah, absolutely.
and maybe go grab a couple of beers.
Yeah, right?
yeah.
Well, Abby and Trent had a really nice visit. Thank you for spending some time with us and showing us around the Gateway Farm. And
Thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
met the dogs, met the kids. I think we've seen a lot, and we had some fun with the splitter. So I think that's going to be great for you, and we look forward to kind of hearing what you find, how it works for you. And as we get into the winter, how soon are you thinking you're going to start, piling up the wood for, heating?
This weekend.
This
Week?
afternoon.
All right,
Yeah.
no time to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we appreciate you guys making the effort to come up here and allowing us to try your product.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to really using it.
Great. I mean, any excuse to get out of the office and come up to the Green Mountains of Vermont. I'm usually a White Mountains of New Hampshire guy, but this has been great. I don't.
Green Mountains.
Yeah, I might be born again. It's really beautiful up here. All right, so we plan on coming back in the spring because we want to see the sugar operation. I am also a hardcore pancakes guy, so blueberry pancakes and maple syrup, Vermont maple syrup is what it's all about. So we're gonna come back and see this whole operation while it's up and running.